Imagine this. The camera glides over an army frozen in time. Row after row of terracotta warriors, expressionless, identical, like a factory reset for violence. You've seen these guys on postcards, coffee table books, airport souvenirs. They look like a faceless killing machine from some ancient dictatorship. But tonight, you're not a tourist. You're one of them. Your name is Heifu. You're a conscript from the Qin state, 2,200 years ago, standing ankle-deep in winter mud. You're not thinking about glory. You're thinking, if my mom doesn't send that coat, I might actually freeze to death out here. Archaeologists digging in a Qin tomb in what is now Hubei province found bamboo letters written by real soldiers like you, family letters buried beside their bodies. They're not epic speeches. They're basically, "Mom, I'm cold. I still haven't received the clothes and money. If you don't send them soon, I might die on the battlefield." You're terrified. The food is bad, the armor is thin, and if you run, the law will punish not just you, but your family. So here's the puzzle. What turns thousands of scared farm boys who just want to go home to their mothers into the most efficient killing machine East Asia had ever seen? This is not a story about honor. This is a story about survival and about how one state, Qin, built maybe the most brutal yet effective social operating system in ancient history. Welcome to the Warring States period, about 475 to 221 BCE. Imagine if modern Europe, France, Germany, Britain, Italy had been at war with each other non-stop, not for 5 years, but for 500. No peace treaties that last, no stable rules, just alliance, betrayal, annihilation. Repeat. If you need a Western anchor, this is Game of Thrones, but without dragons, and the seasons never change back to summer. For ordinary people, it's Mad Max with taxes. States rise and fall at a horrifying pace. In this world, country isn't some eternal thing, it's more like a startup. Sometimes it IPOs, sometimes it gets acquired, and most of the time it just dies. City taken, men of fighting age might be killed or enslaved. Elites executed or transported, populations deported to distant frontiers. If you're a peasant in this world, your life expectancy is low, and your sense of security is basically zero. Your lord today might be a corpse tomorrow, your walled city a smoking crater. After centuries of this chaos engine, people are no longer comparing freedom versus tyranny. They're comparing brutal order versus complete collapse. On the Western fringe, there's one state people used to mock as half-barbarian, good with horses, but rough around the edges. Qin. It doesn't win because its rulers are kinder. It wins because it installs a better system. Let's talk about the guy whose face shows up in every documentary thumbnail. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of Qin. In Western pop culture, he's usually the villain book-burning, scholar-burying, obsessed with immortality. Here's another way to think of him. Caesar's ambition, plus Thanos' methods. He doesn't just want to win the game, he wants to rewrite the game engine. And before him, there's a man named Shang Yang, a reformer in Qin who dies horribly but leaves behind the core product design. Think of Shang Yang as the ruthless product manager of a new kind of state. Together, Qin elites implement something called the 20 ranks of military merit, Ershi Dengjue. It's basically a kill-based promotion ladder. Here's how the game works. Simplified. You're a nobody, maybe a poor peasant, maybe nearly a slave. You go to war. For each enemy you kill, and yes, we're talking about literal severed heads as proof you can earn merit points. Enough points, you climb one rank on the noble ladder. Each rank isn't just a badge. It can mean a small grant of land, actual soil, you and your family can farm as your own. Exemptions from corvée labor, and certain taxes, higher status in your village, better legal treatment, more voice in local affairs. This is not the old aristocratic game where your last name and bloodline lock you in forever. This is gamified violence. Kill, and you can literally change your social class. In modern corporate language, Qin has invented an extreme commission-based sales system. Only the KPI isn't revenue, it's heads. Qin stops being just a kingdom. It becomes a gigantic military startup, where the king is the founder, high ministers are the C-suite, and millions of peasants are commission-only sales reps whose territory is the battlefield. You don't get a salary, you get a chance. Now go back to our soldier, Heifu. He's cold, hungry, and terrified. He writes home begging for clothes and money. But he also knows the rules of the game. If he fights well, if he takes enemy heads, if his unit meets its quotas, there is a small but very real chance his family gets land, gets exemptions from labor, maybe rises one notch on the ladder. If he runs away or breaks formation, Qin law is clear and brutal. He's not just gambling with his own life, he's gambling with his family's fate. So Heifu isn't really fighting for the emperor. He's playing the only game in town where the prize is escaping the bottom of society. The system is monstrous and weirdly fair within its own logic. It turns human beings into numbers. But for the first time on a large scale in Chinese history, a poor farmer can, in theory, kill his way into nobility. If you strip away the moral language, what you see is a state that has incentivized violence better than its competitors. That's how Qin wins the warring states battle royale. So Qin unifies the map. In 221 BCE, Qin conquers the last rival and creates the first Chinese empire. Here's the twist. The dynasty itself is incredibly short-lived, roughly 15 years before it collapses under rebellions, court intrigue, and overextension. If you're thinking in Roman terms, this is like if Rome unified the Mediterranean and then died in less than one human generation. So why call this China's Rome? Because, like Rome, Qin doesn't just conquer land. It installs infrastructure, not just roads and walls, but an operating system for ruling space. First, the commandery and county system. Instead of letting local lords rule their home turf as mini-kings, Qin divides the empire into administrative units, commandery on top, county below, each run by officials appointed and rotated by the central government. It's like taking feudal Europe and replacing every duke and count with a salaried regional manager who can be fired from the capital. Then, Qin starts standardizing everything that makes a market work. Script. They promote a standardized writing style, so officials across the empire can read the same documents without local variations. Currency. They mint round banliang coins with a square hole, a unified currency circulating across former warring states. Weights and measures. They impose a single system of length, volume, and weight, with official standard instruments sent out to commanderies and counties. If you're looking for a modern analogy, this is like Microsoft making one operating system standard across every PC on Earth. Software developers don't have to code for a dozen weird local platforms anymore. After Qin, any ruler who wants to compete seriously in this geographic space is basically forced to build on top of Qin OS. You want a big tax base? You keep the commandery county structure. You want efficient recruitment and logistics? You keep the standardized script and measurements. You want a continental scale market? You keep the unified currency logic. Qin, the dynasty, dies. But Qin, the system, the way of organizing territory, bureaucracy, and data survives. When the Western Roman Empire falls, control over Western Europe fragments and never fully returns as a single empire. New kingdoms emerge. The church becomes a separate power center. And over centuries, the idea of multiple competing nation-states takes root. In China, fragmentation absolutely happens. 3 kingdoms, northern and southern dynasties, 5 dynasties, and 10 kingdoms. But each major contender is still trying to rebuild a single empire on the Qin template. It's as if, no matter how often the machine crashes, everyone's first instinct is reinstall Qin OS, maybe with some patches. The Han dynasty that follows Qin keeps the commandery and county system, refines it, and lays down the blueprint for later empires. Tang, Song, Ming, Qing, all the famous names are running upgraded versions of that same basic architecture. So when people say China has this obsession with unity, it can sound like propaganda or just a personality quirk of some emperors. But think back to Heifu and his world. Before unity, There were 500 years of rolling catastrophe. Cities wiped out, states erased, families like Heifu's ping-ponged between warlords. Every time the empire breaks later on, there's a preview of that nightmare. Warlords, mass death, refugees, local strongmen carving up the map. You can think of great unity not just as a political slogan, but as a kind of civilizational PTSD. The memory of the battle royale never really goes away. Given a choice between messy, dangerous fragmentation that feels like the warring states' redux and a sometimes suffocating top-down order that promises no more battle royale, a lot of people in this historical ecosystem keep choosing order. That's the bloody price of unity. A system that turns fear into stability, human bodies into statistics, and one short-lived dynasty into a 2,000-year operating system. Those terracotta warriors are not just an art installation. They're the frozen front end of a back end called Qin. Rome fell, Qin fell, but only one of their operating systems is still running.